Have you guys got anything to ask of the audience where you see the technology actually might be used from the panel?
Well, I could... Is this working?
Number one.
Yeah, I could certainly ask if anybody would like to come up and badge me and explain perhaps why what I've said was not entirely applicable or not applicable at all. Because the last thing I want to do particularly is waste your time or mine. We believe that there are applications across the range from standalone diesel generator or replacements for diesel generators to cooling to pretty much everything. And what we really need in the short term is data and interaction with end users, because end users are the people who ultimately will really decide whether my company lives or dies.
There's a lot of applications of where this could go. I guess probably the big question is we've got tractors on our farm. You know, you're talking about 25 to 50% improvements. These are all issues we're dealing with now on a farm because energy resources and energy costs, besides labour, is our biggest things. If you look at our farm maps, it's labour is our biggest cost and then probably go on energy.
Yeah.
So I think all the speakers up here hit the nail on the head of our issues, and I think I'd congratulate everybody and congratulate AUSVEG for putting this on. I'm going to go back and think about this and certainly send you emails because it's certainly very applicable.
Thanks. I mean, I think actually every country has its own, and every country has a problem with energy. Worldwide, energy costs are going up. One of the issues is that very often the cost of hydrocarbon-based energy is not necessarily fully disclosed. So when people look at renewables and decarbonisation, they say, well, that's very expensive, we can't afford it. But that's not necessarily fair. It's helpful for us to engage, and one of the reasons I was at the University of Melbourne was because I wanted to engage with local academics, and I was fortunate to meet a former chief scientist of Australia, which was extremely daunting, I have to say, as someone who last did physics in 1977. But it was very helpful because I wanted to understand how longer term the Australian political class want to deal with the fact that you have enormous amounts of sunlight here, something which is very alien to me, although I'm pleased to see it was raining today. Made me feel quite at home. But how they want to incorporate that into the energy mix, and whether they're serious about it in the short term or just serious about it in the long term because it's a good political speech. The technology we have, both on the large scale and the engine side, has short-term applications because it can save you money. But actually, the stuff I put up at the end, the vision slide, really could be a game changer for countries that are reliant on importing energy, but have actually their own energy resources, albeit in a renewable way. What we need is in the short term, I think, some government stroke industry support to help us. You know, we're a small company. There are 8 of us in the company, so 12.5% of my business is sitting at this table. We have. I was looking at actually the revenues of John Deere for last quarter were over $7 billion. For Visy last year, I think with nearly 3 billion Aussie dollars, and our total revenues are 0. And our total investment so far is £4 million. So we are kind of at the mercy of people's goodwill. You know, we need all the help we can get, which is why I've hopped on a plane at the kind invitation of these guys and come 25 hours to talk to you, because really anybody who can help us, we want to be collaborative.
Yeah, look, thank you very much for that. Look, I see rapid uptake of this type of engine in the confined space area, like in protected cropping, in a glass house, in underground mining, because there's zero compression gas. It's a liquid, it just volatiles out to air, so there's no danger other than the coal factor. That's an OH&S pretty easy thing to use. And I think underground mining, instead of using diesel underground mining and electrical where you could have a spark, liquid air engine is going to be a quick uptake. I mean, we're very good at digging holes in this country, And I think that's somewhere it'll end up. Any further questions? Sorry, we have one from the lady up there.
I'm confident that we can actually produce, I'm a medical grower, that we can produce the food of the high breeding and quality that's needed to go, but the issue is how we can get the produce there. Perishable produce to Asia that's going to have shelf life, and how Busy sees that happening, because you obviously would have thought about that.
Sure. It's a good question, and it's always the issue of how do you create the market to be able to receive your product, I suppose, in essence of what you're saying. And a lot of Asian markets, if we think about Japan itself, always looking for the highest premium type product, and the reject rates at a Japanese port is higher than most other ports in the world as well. So blemishes on fruit and vegetables itself, the ability to reject is amazing. So one of the things that Anthony, particularly through the Food Forum, was to be able to drive the awareness that the consumers are there, and as the consumer habits are changing, the demand will increase. And I think, probably the dairy industry has taken the lead in there, that the trust within the local industry of China for the dairy industry is quite low because of some of the issues they've had from contamination and melamine that we would have read about. And they've probably leveraged the best in terms of really creating this brand around Australia. There's a group that I'm involved with called Future Brand, who are now looking at the Australian brand itself. And I think that's something that we need to promote. One of the things that I always think about is Australians are not as patriotic as you see when you go to, say, to the US. They're a highly patriotic nation. And I think it's something that we don't leverage off enough and take the pride that we are a nation, and New Zealand probably do it the best in terms of promoting themselves as a clean, green environment. But if Australia did that more, not in the retro sense of we've seen Australian-made type logos and so forth, but in a new and innovative sense, I think that's key to be able to create or generate the demand of the product of these consumers in Asia that are now, higher wage earners, more consolidated within cities, and then also the opportunity maybe to be a little bit more geographically specific, because there's cities in Asia that have the population density of Australia's entire population, and I think a strategic approach. And I think we also look at that export opportunity sometimes as in Asia, and I think there's a big differentiation in geography and culture, obviously language, but also in terms of consumption. So really targeting where we're actually sending our products specifically.
Sorry, we have one up here, yep. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we'll go 1 and 2, sorry. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Simon from Grace Kate Farms on the Darling Downs. Just with Jeremy, you were talking about cold rooms, were you, or your technology in cooling? You're talking about cold rooms and keeping produce cold?
Well, more refrigerated transport, but one of the things we're talking to Sainsbury's about is looking at their business in a more holistic way. So, for example, Sainsbury's have both the store in which they have an awful lot of heat to expel. They have an awful lot of cold rooms, cold cabinets, but they also then have a local delivery fleet, and they have a long distance delivery fleet. Now, they don't necessarily own all parts of this fleet. In fact, they own almost none of it. But they are very concerned with carbon issues, and they're very concerned with waste heat and how they can deal with that, because a lot of regulation is going in the UK in terms of how you can zero carbon buildings and so on and so forth. So we're looking at it holistically. If you were to look at a Sainsbury's store, you might well have a large tank of of liquid nitrogen or liquid air, for example, which you could use to keep your cold room cool, which you could use to power your chillers via a sort of standby engine, and you could use the excess to power a local delivery fleet as well. So that's where the vision thing gets exciting, because in a 5 or 10 year period, we could have all these different technologies hooked up. and then the economics of it become very exciting. And we're also doing an awful lot to reduce carbon. I mean, for example, one of the large reefer units in the UK, just by switching from a diesel cooling unit to a liquid nitrogen, just a liquid nitrogen total loss unit, would save you about 15 tonnes of carbon a year. Now, if you could then move from that and say, well, now we don't even have to have a diesel engine to power the nitrogen cooling, you could have the nitrogen powering itself effectively, then your saving becomes both a financial one and a carbon one. So yes, it's all across, but as I said, because we're a small business, we have to move in sort of baby steps, and because otherwise, if we try to do everything at once, we'll achieve nothing. So our first application is going to be an engine which does cooling, which can be retrofitted onto a truck. The second application is very likely to be a waste heat recovery unit, but that requires us to work with a Volvo or a Cummins or a Perkins or somebody like that, or a Daimler, to integrate it with their powertrain, and that obviously takes a lot longer. So that answer your question.
Over here.
Yeah, this is for Jeremy. I'm from West Australia. Listening about what you're saying, what concerns me is, okay, if all this works, that's fine and dandy, like we see with everything else. But when it comes to energy, the government always places taxes on top of taxes on top of taxes. What's going to happen in this incident?
What's going to happen when?
Like, for example, I've got a tractor, or et cetera, and I have a liquid storage tank. How much taxes are going to be placed on? How much taxes are we going to be looking at to be paying?
That's a very good question, and I regret it's a question I've no idea the answer to at the moment. It's very difficult to talk to the Treasury in the UK because they don't really talk to anybody. They prefer to talk themselves than listen. As we stand at the moment, we don't believe that there is going to be any taxation on the fuel, and that's really because what you're taking is an industrial process. I mean, you're taking energy which has already been taxed, and therefore you'd be taxing it again. The difference with oil is effectively that you're taking it out of the ground and it's being taxed for the first time at the point of use. The other thing is that if they're serious about decarbonising grids, then starting to tax fresh air. I mean, even George Osborne, as unpopular as he is, could get more unpopular by taxing fresh air as well. But I know it's not a great answer, but it's all we can do at the moment.
Do you think that, like I said, that we could have it needs to be user-friendly, and we need to you need to take a leaf out of Visi, John Deere's, the way that they approach their consumers, right? You're obviously at the early stages to finish developing the product, but I'd like to see smaller portions, so perhaps maybe the government can't tax the air that we breathe, so and then that way we could put it into developing liquid air.
Well, I would love to say today that we can definitely get liquefaction down to a household scale, because if we could, and it's one of the things that we're working on with Air Products and the University of Birmingham. If you can do that, then you open up the possibility for giving a lot of people energy independence. And whether we can do that in the next 3, 5, 7 years, I honestly don't know at the moment. The reason I don't know is because the last 50 years, the industrial gases industry has only focused on getting larger and larger. So, 100 years ago, you might have been able to make half a ton a day. There's now a plant in Cantarell in Mexico which produces 50,000 tons a day, which is vast and covers acres and acres and acres. And that's because large industrial machinery is generally more efficient at scale. But nobody's bothered to look at scaling it down, at taking it down in size. And there's actually no reason why you can't do that. It just needs some time and money and an effort to do it. And it's very much in our interest to do that. So I hope we can get to that point, yes.
Well, folks, I think if there's no questions, it's nearly lunchtime. There will be an opportunity, I hope, after the proceedings this afternoon with drinks where we can actually interface with the presenters, the whole range of presenters. And if you have any further questions, we'll... Sorry, did you have a question or just... Oh, sorry, no, I thought you were waiting. If there are any other things you want to bring up. And once again, well, I'll just ask you before we break that we actually thank the presenters that presented this morning.